Hello and welcome. This is Penny Sansevieri with Author Marketing Experts, and I am here today with author Dave Meerman Scott. David, welcome to the call.
Hey, Penny. Thanks. Good to be here.
You have a new book out called Newsjacking, which I thought was really fantastic and super timely. What gave you the idea for this book?
I've been doing newsjacking myself for a number of years. Never really had named it before that, but the idea of newsjacking, of course, is when you take a look at what's going on in the news. It could be in the national or even international news. As we're recording this, the Republican presidential primaries are in the news, so maybe that's something that you could talk about. Or your local news, something happening in your local city or town, based on the local television station or daily or weekly newspaper in your community. It could also be news in your trade. If you're a B2B company, it might be the industry that you work in. And then you think, how can I inject my ideas into that marketplace, into that news, by writing a blog post or doing a video or something that the purpose of it is to generate interest in the media who are writing about the stories to be able to talk about your take on the story. And so I've been doing that myself for a number of years with some success and a lot of failure because you don't always succeed. And fortunately decided to just put it into a book, which came out, as you know, about 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about, give me an example of newsjacking, because I think a lot of people, when they first hear that term, they go, "Whoa, wow, what is that?"
Yeah, I use the term newsjacking. It sounds negative because carjacking and hijacking and whatnot.
Right.
It's not. It's actually a perfectly valid strategy. It's a bit of an intriguing kind of name, which is why I chose it, but it's certainly not bad. So what it means is something happens in the news and you talk about it. So I'll give you a B2C example, business to consumer example. How about when Anthony Weiner resigned his post as U.S. Congressman because of a sexting scandal? Literally, as that news conference was happening, that he was announcing his resignation, Larry Flynt, the publisher of Hustler magazine, wrote a blog post on his blog offering Anthony Weiner a job as the vice president of his company's internet division. And as a result of doing that, the media who are writing about Anthony Weiner now had a second paragraph to the story. The first paragraph is he resigns. The second paragraph of such a story is always, what is he going to do next? So now they say, he resigned. What is he going to do next? Oh, by the way, he could join Larry Flynt's organization as his VP of Internet Communications. And then that was picked up by hundreds and hundreds of media outlets. Of course, every time it promotes, to a certain degree, Larry Flynt's business. I'll give you a B2B, business-to-business example. So a company called Eloqua found out, Joe Payne, the CEO of Eloqua, found out that one of his biggest competitors, a company called Market to Lead, was acquired by Oracle. And in the acquisition, it was announced on the Oracle website in this 3-paragraph terse kind of big brother-ish, awful kind of announcement. We have acquired Market to Lead, and that's basically all it said. So now Joe Payne has an opportunity to define what it means to the market, to the industry, to this industry, which is Eloqua and Market to Lead are in the marketing automation software business. So what Joe did was he wrote a blog post. His blog post was called Oracle Joins the Party, and it was about how great it is that this giant software company, Oracle, has acquired a company in the marketing automation software business because it shows how important the space is. He cited statistics. He had some pithy quotes in his blog post. So now when the media who has to write about this, and the analysts too, by the way, have to write about this acquisition, they've got two things to draw on, not one. They've got the 3 sentences, terse, very kind of corporate-y PR statement from Oracle, and they have this fantastic blog post that puts the whole thing into context by the CEO of the competing company. And, PC Magazine and Information Week and all these publications, when they were writing their stories over the next few hours, all of them cited Joe Payne. And as a result of this, they've generated over $1 million worth of new business. Now imagine you're a B2B company, you generate over $1 million worth of new business as a result of one blog post. Mm-hmm. In both of those cases, there's a few things that are important. Number one, it was fast, instant, real time. You got to do it now. Mm-hmm. You cannot wait till tomorrow morning. You have to do it now. And number two, it has to be an informational piece of content with the proper keywords, so when the journalists are looking for more information, they'll find your content.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, let me take you back to two pieces that I know that I was reading in your book that I found really interesting. The timeline. You said it has to be really quick. In your book, you have this diagram with the timeline in which is brilliant, because most people think, "Oh, I'll get back to that tomorrow."
It's too late.
Tomorrow's too late.
Tomorrow's too late.
Ideally, what's the window, David?
Well, as quickly as you can. So what does that mean? A blog post, you should get a blog post out within an hour if you can after the news breaks. Mm-hmm. The problem is most organizations have this crazy approval process. Therefore, most organizations simply can't do newsjacking under their current, communications guidelines because someone from the PR department has to sign off on the blog post. The lawyers have to look at it. That gives CEOs like Larry Flint and Joe Payne, the two examples I used, it gives them a great advantage because if they're a CEO of a company, they can just say, okay, we're going to do this. I don't need to ask anyone else. I'm the CEO. If you run your own business, if you're an independent like I am, you can just say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it out there. And I recommend if you do work for a big organization that you should figure out how you can get an approval process in place that encourages employees to do this kind of thing without having to go through the approval process. They go through, they get a pre-approval in a sense. Because typically what happens is it's likely that the story that you need to write about is going to happen at night. It's going to happen on a weekend. It's going to happen on a holiday. Yeah. It's going to happen when the CEO's on vacation or the CEO's at a conference. And it's going to happen when there isn't a way to get the approval. Imagine if something breaks. The most important news in your marketplace breaks on Thanksgiving Day. You've got Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're talking about American Thanksgiving, which happens on a Thursday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right. Sunday, Monday. It's so too late that it might as well been in 1846 when the news broke because you're not going to be able to do anything about it.
Yeah. Is a blog post enough though? Because a lot of people think, oh, I have to contact the media. I have to beat down their door. Is that enough to write a blog post?
Well, here's the thing. In the old days, you had to pitch the media. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's either or. You can still do that. You had to say, hey, newspaper reporter, TV reporter, here's what I want to tell you. Please pay attention to me. But guess what? The way the media writes their stories now or creates their broadcast stories is they go to Google. They've got a story to write about an acquisition, let's say, which is the Eloqua example. Mm-hmm. They don't wait for somebody to contact them. They go to the search engines or they go to Twitter. They look for the hashtag that people are using. They say, okay, I've got to write news about this topic. Who has got some information on this topic that I can draw from? And I'm actually a reporter myself. I've worked for Knight Ridder for 6 years on the editorial desk, although I wasn't a reporter for them. I worked in marketing, but got a great understanding of how the editorial system works. I write for the Huffington Post now. I write for some other publications. So I understand how this works. Imagine you decide right away you want to write a story about something. Mm-hmm. Bang, go to Google. You go to Wikipedia to get some background information. Mm-hmm. You look and see who else has maybe written some stories recently that you can read. Oh, there's somebody who wrote a blog post about the exact thing that I'm trying to write about. Oh my gosh, it's a credible source. I'm going to quote them. They don't even contact you. They just quote directly from the blog post.
That's another thing that you have to be really careful about is what you put out there, because I always tell people everything is your resume. So you really don't want anything out there that you don't want to be quoted on, right? Because that's another lesson to businesses.
Well, I would never put it in a negative term like that. I would put it in a positive term. I would say everything you put out there is your resume, so you have a great opportunity to put out interesting, pithy quotes in your blog post that the media can pick up. I think there's too much negativity within companies out there, and I wouldn't recommend, the message of, oh, you have to be really, really careful. Everyone's already paranoid.
Yeah.
My job is to tell people, don't be freaking paranoid. It's just communications. Do you go to cocktail parties being paranoid about what you talk about? No, you just have conversations. If you go into your blog post by being paranoid, that's when this behavior of running it by the lawyers and other people comes into play, and you've lost the opportunity.
Right.
No, this is about being interesting, providing some valuable information, and getting it out quickly.
So how can somebody, because we can always write about our topic, how do you stay alert to a newsjacking opportunity?
Well, there's a few things. Number one is follow the important blogs or media outlets for the topic that you're familiar with, or that you have some credibility to write about. There might be a half dozen or 20 or 30 things that you should follow. Mm-hmm. But then you have to be open to serendipity. You have to keep your mind open. You have to keep your eyes and ears open for possibilities. I recommend going to Google News. Mm-hmm. It's just news.google.com, mm-hmm. and turn off all the personalization. You don't want personalization. You want to be completely open to everything that's happening in the news, because the best newsjacking opportunities are the ones that catches people completely by surprise. There's a tornado in some town, and that has something to do with what you do. You can't predict that there was going to be a tornado. So as soon as you turn on personalization, you've lost. So you keep it completely wide open, a fire hose of news. Look at it. I recommend reading a daily newspaper. I recommend reading a weekly news magazine, and you can find information that way.
What about Google Alerts? Google Alerts, is that good, or is that too late?
Well, that's a form of personalization. Google Alerts are great. I'm a huge fan of Google Alerts. You can certainly set up an alert for certain terms in your industry or terms that you write about. Sure, that's great. You should definitely do that. But keep in mind that the best newsjacking opportunities comes from something that nobody is prepared for. It comes from something that's completely out of the blue. I'm just thinking of an example at the top of my head. Remember a couple of years ago when the U.S. Air flight landed in the Hudson River in New York City? Mm-hmm. How can you set up a Google alert to tell you that there's going to be a plane land in the Hudson River? You can't. Mm-hmm. So you have to be open for complete serendipity.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And also, I would imagine that Twitter hashtags are probably pretty important to this too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Twitter hashtags are a very good way to both follow what's going on, but also to get your information out there. Mm-hmm. If there's a story that's fast breaking that you have a take on, take a look and see if there's a Twitter hashtag that's developed around it, and then send a tweet using that hashtag when you get a blog post or a video up, because that might be the way that the media finds your content.
And the media is, and I think it's important for people to understand this, they're always looking for unique angles to stories, right?
That's
even
right.
Now when there's so much information out there.
Well, they want to try to get a different angle on a story. You're absolutely right. And that's precisely why newsjacking works. Because every reporter has access to the facts, who, what, when, where, why, how, Anthony Weiner resigned his position as a U.S. congressman because of a sexting scandal. Every reporter already has that. What's the next part of that story? What's the second paragraph and the third paragraph? How can they make their story different than everybody else's? That's why they go to the Twitter hashtag, if there is one created. That's why they go to Google and they type in, Anthony Weiner resigns or something to figure out if there's someone else talking about this in a way that they can use in their story and try to differentiate it a little bit.
Right.
Exactly. And that's your opportunity to get that paragraph.
How often do you think that somebody, on average, a company, could get picked up with newsjacking? I know that's a little nebulous, but you said you've done it a lot. You've had some success, you've had some failure. Is there?
Well, I think you can expect that you'll have 90% failure. What I
Sure.
mean by that is, and I want to define what I mean by failure. Failure is that it was not picked up by the media. Mm-hmm. This is for mere mortals. I mean, if you're Bill Clinton, everything you write will get picked up. I'm talking about mere mortals like us.
Right.
But
right.
if you write a blog post expecting to get the media to pick it up, you will most likely not succeed. However, that you shouldn't see that as a failure of the blog post, because it still may be a fantastic blog post. And if you're writing about a timely topic, the existing readers of your blog, those that subscribe to your blog, will be, wow, this guy's really cool, or this woman's really cool. She's got a great post on a timely topic. Wow, I should pass this on to my friends. That's still a huge success, but it may have failed as newsjacking because a reporter didn't write about it. I think that roughly 10% of the time, at least that's my experience, you write something with the express purpose of having a reporter find it, and they will find it. Mm-hmm. And that's been my experience. I've succeeded in newsjacking maybe a dozen times. I've tried to newsjack at least, maybe 100, and most of the time it doesn't work, but that's fine, because it still ends up being a good blog post that's valuable.
Well, but that's another thing that you are really teaching people in this book, and something that has become so important is content. People, we have to create good content to keep people coming back to our site. So when you talk about the 90% failure rate, you're absolutely right. You're still creating a great resource.
It's only a failure as a newsjack. It's not a failure as a blog post.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Because you write, obviously you've written the new rules of marketing and PR. You've written on social media longer than most people have written on social media.
I've been writing about social media before the term social media existed.
Right, exactly. Before it was, now social media is the new black and everybody wants to be online. How crucial is content now that we have all these platforms and all these ways to get out there? How crucial is good content?
Content's the most important thing, because social media is just a form of sharing content. Mm-hmm. What's Twitter? What's Facebook? What's YouTube? They're just the tools to share ideas. Mm-hmm. So you've got to have good ideas, and you've got to create the content that gets that idea out there. It could be text-based, video-based, photography, infographics, charts and graphs. There's all types of different forms of content. Mm-hmm. The social tools are just the ways that content gets shared and people talk about it. But the most important thing is the content. A Twitter feed without content is, it's kind of boring.
Well, without interesting content, right? Because a lot of people put stuff out there that's not really interesting to read.
Well, and then you have people who say, well, who cares what I had for lunch today? Well, nobody does care what you had for lunch today. And if that's what you're tweeting about, then you've got a self-fulfilling prophecy on your hands.
Right, exactly. David, I want to thank you so much. David Meerman Scott, his book called Newsjacking, which is available now. I loved it. I highly recommend it. Went on a
and what we didn't talk about, it's an ebook only.
Yes.
It is not in print. It's on Kindle and iPad and Sony e-reader and Barnes & Noble Nook and a bunch of other platforms. I chose to do it only as an ebook because when I launched the book, I actually newsjacked the Kindle Fire. The ebook of newsjacking came out on Kindle the exact same day that the Kindle Fire came out. And as a matter of fact, some people who wrote about the Kindle Fire ended up talking about my ebook because it was the first book that was optimized for the Kindle Fire in the market. It's in full color, which Kindle Fire is. It has hyperlinks to external content, like when I talk about the Anthony Weiner blog post that Larry Flint did, I have a link right there in it that you can go to on your Kindle Fire or your iPad or whatever. So as a matter of fact, the newsjacking ebook launch ended up being a successful newsjack.
I think that is a great story, and it's a great book, again, in ebook only, newsjacking. It's a great read, and I think it's absolutely mandatory for anybody who's trying to get into the media, create content, and have a social media platform. David Meerman Scott, you can access his website at davidmeermanscott.com. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be with us today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.